Hello and welcome back to the Peterpodcast. I'm your host, reporter Taylor Clydesdale, and with me today is Councillor Lesley Parnell. Today we're going to be talking about various topics, including the sale of PDI to Hydro One. Stemming from this, is it possible that this could happen to another utility in Peterborough?
No.
No? Hard no on that one?
Hard no. I know some people have implied during the campaign that our water was up for grabs, and it is absolutely not. The City of Peterborough is the sole stakeholder in Peterborough Utilities Commission, and that is not up for debate.
And we're also going to be talking about the news in the farmers market, as well as the southern portion of the Parkway. So, hope you enjoy the show.
Okay, thank you very much, Taylor, for inviting me to your podcast. My name is Lesley Parnell, and I am City Councillor third term for Autonomy Ward right here in our wonderful city of Peterborough.
Yeah, and we're already kind of, the horses are off to the races so far in this term of council. We've already had a few major issues rear their heads. And so we've got a list here of all the things we'd like to discuss, and hopefully if we have time we can get to all of them.
Absolutely.
One of the issues which has come up at the last meeting of council was the Morrow Park Farmers Market, the Peterborough District Farmers Market, which is different from the new Farmers Market, which is the Peterborough Regional Farmers Market.
Yes.
So that was before council because the lease, at the initial vote at General Committee, it was decided to extend the lease for one more year, and that's going to give staff some time to look at options for whether or not they want to kind of maintain the status quo at the market or potentially put out the operation of the market to tender. So,
well, we will be putting the market, we will be going to tender on it. I mean, that's an important thing to do every now and then, so that it's open and transparent and people can actually, different people could bid to run the market at Morrow Park. That's a completely fair process. We just don't know the terms of reference at this point, so that is something staff would like some time to develop, and we want some public engagement as well. And so I was just concerned that we made sure we make our decision by at least January of 2020, because many of the farmers and the craftspeople as well, they need to plan ahead for their crops or their wares for the summer, the market. And so we need to have that earlier decision time.
Mm-hmm. And you had asked, and it did become part of the motion, that if it does go to tender, it does go to tender before next January.
So we can actually make the decision by January 2020.
So what are the advantages and disadvantages? Like what's the premise of putting it out to tender, the market's operation?
Well, there's always different management styles, and different people could bring different things to the table, and everybody deserves a shot. It's a very important market to the city, which, now it's basically in two. So both, or one or the other, or both could actually bid on this, or there could be somebody else out there who would like to organize a market. So this is the opportunity to see who's out there who is interested and pick the best group or person to run the market going forward, for a time period. It's an important process to go through every now and then.
And it would be possible for the PDFMA, which currently runs the Morrow Park Market, to reapply and to potentially win that tender process and continue to operate as well.
I fully expect that they will be bidding on that tender for sure. They've expressed interest. They've worked really hard to get through the little bubble that we went through about a year ago. And so they've worked towards that. They have a new manager, some new board members, some new rules for their members. And so it's all very positive. And now they'll be able to actually put all of that in writing and bid.
And are you a customer of the Morrow Park Market?
Yes, I do go.
Okay.
Yes.
And what's your observations been? I mean, throughout 2017, 2018, there was that conflict between the vendors that did lead to an offshoot that caused a new market to spring up.
Yes.
So I'm kind of curious. I'm not really a customer at either, so I'm curious what people's thoughts are of how things have gone since then.
Well, you should definitely go. There are so many delicious options at the markets, and it's our local people. that are running them and depending on us to be customers. So go to any of the markets, either one on Saturday or the one on Wednesday, and support our local people. It's very important. And I was there actually quite a bit, especially last year, because we were selling raffle tickets for the Brock Mission rebuild, and the market was very kind and let us be there selling these tickets. But as far as the politics goes between the two groups, as a councillor, all of us on council actually were advised to stay out of it. It is between two tenants, essentially. We are just the landlord, and they rent the space from us, and we were encouraged not to get involved into their internal politics.
And that's something that, speaking to our Commissioner of Community Services, Alan Seabrook, he has clarified that to council a couple of times that, it's not particularly the city's business to get too involved in the private affairs of a farmer's market. So what is the city's role then if the city does decide to put the market operation to tender?
Well, I do imagine we will be putting it to tender, and just like any other process out there, if it's a service that the city would be expected to provide, and if we're not providing it ourselves, then we will tender it out and have some other group do it for us, and that's under provincial statute. So it will come to tender, and staff will come up, just like every other bidding process, staff will come up with the criteria. They will get the bids, they will receive the bids and score them, and it will only be staff that does this. Councillors do not get involved, or the public does not get involved in writing the tender or marking the tender. And then whatever the result is, the recommendation will be recommended to council, and we make the decision.
Yeah, and so what is the stake exactly for having a farmer's market in your community? Because a lot of people do seem to think of farmers markets as these kind of rallying points for the kind of rural and urban communities to come together and to create that community spirit.
I think they're very, very important. And I wish everybody would take their children to the farmers market and meet real farmers. And we should even expand on it a little bit more and add more to the educational component of, farmers feed cities, I think it's really important. And this is a way to bring the rural and the urban peoples together and share commerce and share information and friendship. And it really is a mainstay in the city of Peterborough. It's a very popular attraction, and now we have 3 of them. So
yeah, and you know what, I think that there was some debate about whether or not that community spirit was being wrapped up in all this politics at the time, and I think what everyone really wants to see is to see that put to bed. And whether or not it's been dying down or whether or not it's still continuing, I think that what people are really looking for is closure, to the ability to have that community spirit back without the politics that it's been wrapped up in.
Exactly. And so that's why I've really tried to stay out of that aspect of it. I still go as a customer, and it is important to go and speak with people. But really, I do wish people would put that behind the market. It was an unfortunate public family fight, which was very unfortunate. But please put that behind you, because the farmers, all of the vendors that are there really depend on our consumer dollars and our friendship.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to move on from that topic to, while we're talking about Morrow Park and the Morrow building, let's move on to the other big issue that Morrow Park is tied up in, which is the new major sport and event center.
Yes.
Now, that is, planned and proposed, and the consultants have been told to shorten down the list and come back. Is it this term? It is this term that they would come back with recommendations.
Yes, we are hoping to have that decision made, if not the end of the summer, by fall, to actually officially say which location we are going to focus on moving forward. It is a big project, and it's going to take us quite some time to come up with the money and get this facility built, and the sooner the better, as well as our twin pad out at Trent. We need to get on with that as well. So basically, there are a number of sites that have been put on the short list for the consultant to really do the pros and cons, and we do have to do our homework, and we really shouldn't just ignore certain spots because it may not be our personal favorite or whatever, but we have to look at these things very strategically and what is going to be the best short term and long term, and maybe it's a little bit more difficult to get there short term, but it might be the best overall location. But it really does come down to many factors. We do have to think about what would this sports center actually do to the neighborhood that it goes in, for one thing. Personally, I don't think we should be taking up a valuable waterfront for such a facility. And do we own the land or not? How much would that land be to purchase it if it was for sale? These are all questions that will need to be really nailed down and answered very specifically so we can make the best decision possible.
Yeah, and so then there are a number of sites which have been chosen by the consultants. James Stevenson Park,
Yes.
Over by East City, some section of the GE lands, the current site of the Canoe Museum, because they are going to be moving over to the lift lock soon. And then kind of the two big ones that have been the focus of attention, Market Plaza, with a combination of Market Plaza and the City Works Yard, which the city does own, and Morrow Park. So I know it's still early and I don't want to dedicate you to a certain path, but do you have a preference among those sites?
Well, right now, knowing what I know, although I have not seen the final report, and if there's some new piece of information that will come out later, I may change my mind, but right now I would say Morrow Park.
Yeah.
Because we own the land, and at first I was resistant to Morrow Park, actually, even though I think in my last interview I did with you, because at the time we really hadn't had the sign-off of the Agricultural Society, and we certainly did not at that time have the blessing of the family who donated that land to the city. Now we have that. So those were two big obstacles in my mind that would make it very difficult to use any part of Morrow Park for our new major sports and entertainment facility. Now we can do it, and we already own the land, and we have to improve Lansdowne Street anyway. People are just dying for it's probably a bad word, but they're just very much wanting us to fix that part of Lansdowne Street, and it's been kind of put on the back burner a little bit until we figure out exactly what we're going to do with Morrow Park. Once we get that decision on if it's going to Morrow Park or not, then we will get going on Lansdowne Street reconstruction.
Yeah, and there is other activity on Lansdowne Street in the area as well. There's the property of the former malt factory down there, which is planned to become, residential and commercial properties. So there is some activity in the area of Morrow Park, but there's also the argument of putting it downtown, which, was something that council had directed the consultants to look at in order to synergize with businesses. There's that image of going out to the pub and grabbing a few beers after going to the game, and that generates some economic activity for the downtown and for those businesses.
Yeah, well, that's true for downtown, but it's also true for Lansdowne Street. We have many great restaurants on Lansdowne Street as well that would also benefit. And it's so close, people can go this way to those restaurants or that way to those restaurants, and it's pretty much the same distance.
Do you think
for Morrow Park?
Do you think that it still has that walkability, though, if it's put at Morrow Park?
It's a few more blocks to the actual downtown core, or to Hunter Street, for example, but it's still very doable. And the official plan is coming forward, and I believe the boundaries of the downtown will be officially changed, for a number of our incentive programs and what have you. So all of this is in the works. It's not solidified yet, but this is the conversation, or one of the conversations that are happening and open to public engagement as well.
And the downtown is, I don't know if it's like physically headed east, but growth from the downtown is headed east. We're seeing some work happening on Crescent Street with new proposed housing developments. There's definitely some activity planned along Lansdowne. So that area between the two proposed sites is definitely getting busier. So it'll definitely be in that, well, I can't say whether it'll definitely be in that area. I don't think anyone really knows right now, but it looks like there's heavy evidence to suggest that it'll be between those two sites, Morrow Park and Market Plaza.
Those, again, Taylor, unless something really different comes out or some new information that we're not aware of right now, it seems very logical to me.
So allow me to play devil's advocate then and say,
No.
if Morrow Park is definitely the cheaper option, the city already owns the land, getting out of the agreement with the Ag Society is much cheaper than buying and demolishing Market Plaza, then what's even the point of going through a consultation process and paying the consultants to narrow down the list when one site, financially at least, looks more attractive than the others.
Yeah, well, I agree with that, but it is very important actually to go through that process because we already know, for example, the Downtown Association, they really want it downtown. So unless we do our due diligence and prove one way or the other, which is mathematically and strategically the best site long term, then we'd be open to criticism that, nope, you actually didn't do all your homework to come up with the very best location. We have to make sure we do all of that homework, all of that consultation to come up with the absolute best compromise.
So by doing that research, then, does that put you in a better legal standpoint to defend your decision to be in that one location over the other?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very important. You can't just make a decision on based on, oh, well, I like that one better than the other. It has to be based on facts and reason and good strategic planning.
Well, there's one location we know it's not going to, and that's the downtown No Frills site.
That's right. But you know what? We do need that grocery store, but we have another one, and there's a possibility of another one as well. So these things can change over time. And bear in mind, the city does own the Harveys, which will be redeveloped at some point. So strategically, the No Frills location could become something else. And who knows? Now we're into the time where we're thinking, why have a single-story grocery apartment with nobody living above it? So it's really important going forward that if we build a grocery store, especially in our downtown, that it has apartments above it. More people living downtown makes for a better downtown.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of angst around that downtown Harvey's that's taking up waterfront space, which, good Harvey's. I actually really enjoy grabbing a burger there occasionally. Yeah. But definitely that's a site that is not going to be a Harvey's forever.
Yeah, best pickles in Peterborough. Let's have extra pickles.
All right, I'll take your word for it on that one. But so before we take a break, let's just kind of give a brief overview. So there was a municipal election in October where you were reelected. And there was some changeover on council as well. Mm-hmm. We got a new mayor. We got 3 new councilors. Yes. So what are your thoughts on these new people on council and how have things gone for you so far?
Yeah, well, very good. And it is a different council. Each term is a different council. My first council was 2010 to 2014, and I was the only woman on council with 10 men. So, and with Mayor Bennett, and he put me on 10 committees in the first year, and I swear he did that just to keep me busy. But we did develop a good working relationship over time, and got a lot of things accomplished. Sometimes I disagreed with them, sometimes I agreed with them, but there was always a discussion anyway. And so this is again a different term, different council. Everybody's in learning mode. And bear in mind, it is different this time because we've had big changeover in our staff as well. So losing our director of planning, it was a big blow to us. Jeffrey Humble was just amazing. And so we're very sad to see him go. He's on his way to China to work. Cynthia Fletcher has joined our staff as our commissioner. So she has 7 departments under her. So she's got quite the learning curve as well, but she's just jumped right in and has been doing a great job so far. We're very happy to have her on board. But these are all changes because during, from the time of the election until now, I'm so used to being able to contact various people depending on, what the concern is by the constituent that comes my way. And now it's, I can't really ask Cynthia that yet. She's really, not up to speed on this, or she hadn't actually started yet. And so there was a bit of a gap there. But we're getting there, and everybody's, I've volunteered to help any of the new counselors with anything that I can help them with, and I know I'm not the only one. Other counselors who have been there before have also welcomed the new people in, and we will all help them.
Yeah, and I know something that I still get tripped up by is some of the department heads kind of got wrapped up into new commissioner positions. That happened last turn, and that's something that I've struggled with because there's a few commissioner positions that I'm like, what's their official title again? Okay, yes. I need to look that up again. But aside from that, so definitely a time of transition for City Hall in Peterborough.
Yes.
There were a few notable retirements as well. Wayne Jackson, who for a long time was the the head
Director of Utility Services.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So he's gone now, and then his position has been wrapped up into Cynthia Fletcher's portfolio. So
Yes. So she has all of utility services and planning.
that's a hell of a job.
It's a big portfolio. It really is. But under at the next layer of management, we have some fantastic people there to support Cynthia and to support us. Blair Nelson kind of stepped into Wayne Jackson's shoes, and he's amazing. I've always been very, very impressed with him. And Ken Hetherington in our planning department has stepped up, and so we do still have a lot of fantastic people there to help us through.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's take a short break, and we can come back, and there's a few more topics that we can discuss.
Absolutely.
And we'll be right back then.
Very good.
All right, great. So we're back on the Peter podcast, and let's talk about a few other topics. Let's start with the Brock mission.
Okay.
You have been a pretty vocal advocate in favor of fundraising for the Brock mission, and was it this term of council or the last term of council that came back with the redesign?
So this all happened last term of council,
Okay.
and at the time I thought, as a female councillor, I should help the men's shelter because I had helped the women's shelter before and the youth shelter, and it was the time to help our men. And we are rebuilding the Brock mission, and so we had an initial estimate in 2014, and then of course when the actual bids came in 2018, obviously they were higher than expected from 2014. And so we had to take a pause, even though we were actively building momentum and fundraising. Timing was bad in that we lost some momentum on the fundraising, but it was the right thing to do in that we had another look at the actual design, and we were able to hire a local architect to actually do this now in a less expensive build, while still meeting our goals for the mission, for the shelter, the transitional housing, as well as forecast will be in there. So we were able to come up with a more economical design.
Mm-hmm. And you have spoken before about the difficulties of raising money for a men's shelter. How do you deal with that?
Well, it is a little bit more difficult to fundraise, and it's a sad fact, but it's true. It was more difficult to sell those raffle tickets for a men's shelter than for a women's shelter. That's part of the reason I took it on as a female counselor, was to help the men. And we were raffling off a beautiful piece of art, but art is not everybody's cup of tea either. Mm-hmm. But it was a beautiful painting, and a local woman won it, and then she turned around and donated it back to Brock Mission. So when we actually built the new mission, somebody's already volunteered to build a beautiful secure case for it. And it will be located in the new mission, maybe in one of the session rooms, perhaps, or consultation rooms, who knows, but somewhere important in the Brock mission. So that was really, and we ended up raising, it was fantastic actually. It was just under $16,000 in ticket sales, but $30,000 in additional donations came in.
Oh, that's awesome.
Just from the awareness, plus the local company has offered to supply and install the low voltage wiring, and the paint has been donated. And actually, Taylor, I'm glad you're asking me, because I would like to ask any of our businesses out there, if they are in a position, if they could donate any of the specified building materials that we need for it. There is an opportunity, and that will essentially come right off the cost, and of course they would get a tax receipt.
And what's the best way, if people do want to donate either money or building supplies, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way for money is to send it to the actual Brock Mission Capital Campaign, and then it'll go into that account for the capital campaign. If it comes to the City of Peterborough, we will make sure that it is properly allocated for the build. Any donation of materials or labor, please contact Jillian Barnes at the City of Peterborough. She is our in-house person who is overseeing the project now, which makes me feel very happy because she's another wonderful person at the City of Peterborough.
Mm-hmm. And right now, the housing market it's pretty difficult to break out in. We definitely have that housing crunch. Pretty low rental vacancy rate. It's like 1.5%. So one component that is interesting that has been a point of discussion for this new Brock mission is these transitional housing units.
Yes.
And so that'll definitely, it'll create a little bit more room to help people to get actual housing and fill some of that housing needs in the city as well.
Yeah, these are essentially bachelor apartments, but with support. So it's not like we're putting a man in there and ignoring him. He will have all the support he needs to relearn the skills to get back into independent living. That is what the whole transitional housing is about. It's working with our women's shelter and with our youth emergency shelter as well. So we want to do the same model with our men's shelter. And it's really important.
Yeah, and I have heard some criticisms of the model that it kind of creates a two-tier system of homelessness. I don't know if you have any response to that or...
Well, the people who are in the transitional housing have responsibilities and they have to pay rent. So it is different. It's not exactly the same as staying in a dorm room with a whole bunch of other men, like an open dorm room. This is your own little bachelor apartment, but you pay rent on it and get back into independent living.
And that helps people who can then transition out of that into a more formal living arrangement then?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, so is there anything else that you want to add on that topic, or are we free to move on then?
No, that's good. But we're also tackling the housing issue, in that there's a number of applications in the pipeline to increase apartments, condos. We've increased our value in affordable housing monies as well in that budget. So there's much interest behind the scenes, applications coming forward. Our planning staff are going to be quite busy. And then, of course, these applications will have to come to council for approval. So keep up the good work out there, people, creating housing in our city, because we really do need it.
Yeah. So moving on to the next topic, let's discuss PDI, the Peterborough Distribution Inc.,
Yes.
the lines and poles company
Yes.
owned by Kofi. So that was in the news recently because the report came to council to basically just update you guys on where things were with the sale right now to Hydro One. And so one of the results that kind of came out of that progress report was kind of some finality to the decision.
Yes.
A few councillors had run on potentially ending the sale or opposing the sale. And it appears as though we're at a stage where it would be financially and legally unreasonable to do so, is my understanding.
Well, that was true going back to before the election as well. That is not new. We, for all the reasons that we voted yes to sell, those are very important reasons that still exist, and those would be benefits that we would lose if, in fact, the Ontario Energy Board does not accept the deal. It's going to be very painful, actually, because we'll be out all of the costs. The city will be out, Hydro One will be out, and PDI will all be out the costs of putting this deal together. And we'll lose out on all the benefits why we said yes in the first place. So the Regional Operations Centre, which is a new build, doesn't sound like much, 30 jobs, but it is important. And these are good Ontario Hydro jobs. And bear in mind, it also protects the 70 Hydro One jobs that we have on Crawford Drive. Those are regional jobs that could move, but with having the regional centre here, we don't have to worry about those jobs either. The PDI jobs are all protected as well. We do know this, and as a matter of fact, they keep their seniority, they move into a bigger union, and the process has already happened. People are settling in to have accepted that, oh yes, I'll take that raise for my same job, thank you. And so these emotional parts of it are also transitioning, and people are realizing that it is a good deal. Our ratepayers out there will get a lower distribution rate going forward, because for the next 5 years, if it's approved by the OEB, of course, it's a 1% decrease in your distribution rate, solid for 5 years, and then only cost of living for the next 5 years. And I know people put the fear factor out there on year 11, but the Ontario Energy Board would never say, okay, sorry, we'll let you raise your rates now to make up for the last 10 years. That is not their job. Their job is to protect the ratepayer, and that would not be allowed. So the base rate going forward for the distribution rate now is lower going out in time. And that's for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And that is what I hear from anti-PDI sale proponents, is basically just saying that, when that 11th year does hit, we've put control over these costs into Hydro One, which, they're not a local entity and they would not protect people's wallets as well as if PDI was locally owned.
The OEB protects the ratepayer, whether they're in Omemee or Peterborough. They are protecting the ratepayer. And over anybody who owns the poles and wires. So the consumer is protected.
Yeah, and there is still the argument that utilities should not be owned by private entities. Utilities should be owned publicly. There was pushback when Hydro One, when the previous Liberal government chose to privatize Hydro One, and
Yes.
I still do see arguments that it shouldn't have happened now, but
Yep.
it has happened, and there's people locally who don't think that we should be essentially privatizing PDI.
I would agree with that at the provincial level. And if I had been polled on that, I would have said no. I don't want the provincial government to sell off any of Hydro One to private interests. I'm totally with you on that. But that was the reality that had happened, and that was the reality that we had to deal with. And we also knew that the province had gone from about 370 odd local distribution companies like us down to 75 at the time of that December 2016 vote, and it's less than that now. And the goal, even with the new provincial government, even under Doug Ford, they still want to consolidate the distribution companies down to about 8 or 10.
Really?
So there's no way...
They want to get single digits on the number of utilities then?
That was the information that we were given, all of us, and that was public information. All of these facts were public information. We were all given the deal at the same time. Anyway, we knew that was coming, and there was no way PDI could survive that momentum either. Plus, we can't grow our customer base. We could maybe put up a few apartment buildings and get some more customers that way, but we're landlocked. We can't go out into Ontario Hydro and take over their territories out in the county.
And there are parts of the city that already are, where
Correct.
the wires and poles are already owned by Hydro One as
Correct.
well.
That's right. So we can't grow the market, but they, we're basically a little donut hole surrounded by Ontario Hydro. So it makes much more sense for the bigger entity to have control over the whole distribution center, which is, what the province is looking at anyway. So that was another reality that, don't like that, but it's the reality. I've got to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any messages for people who, they're still kind of stung by the fact that this is happening and they continue to not want the PDI sale to happen?
The differences between ideology, right, and our bigger thing, feeling that, we don't really want to deal with this particular company or the idea that the province is consolidating. That's ideology. We have to face the facts, and we have to make a fact-based best decision for our taxpayer and our ratepayer. So it is separating the ideology from the facts and the reality of the situation. And please look at the facts. You have to, because it's very easy if you don't like something, is that you just don't listen or you don't hear. Somebody can be telling you the facts, but if you've already made up your mind, you don't really necessarily hear the facts.
Yeah, and it certainly it's ignited a lot of passion in the community. I when I look at kind of the top issues in Peterborough, PDI has certainly gotten up there alongside the Parkway, and the Parkway has been something that's been going on for 70 plus years at this point.
I know, exactly. But the PDI with the timing, it really became an election issue, and there was a lot of misinformation at the doorstep and fear mongering, and I felt very badly for so many of, even the senior citizens in my ward that were being given wrong information, and fear was given to them, and they were truly worried about it. And it was a long conversation at many doors to explain it to people, and that was, oh, okay, I get it now. I'm fine. And I'd rather get their vote or a lawn sign, but they were happy to understand and get the information instead of the incorrect information that was kind of floating around out there.
Well, I think sooner rather than later, and then definitely this year, the OAB is supposed to make a decision, but eventually the PDI debate will be put to rest. And I think the only other question that people do have stemming from this is it possible that this could happen to another utility in Peterborough?
No.
No? Hard no on that one?
Hard no. I know some people have implied during the campaign that our water was up for grabs, and it is absolutely not. The City of Peterborough is the sole stakeholder in Peterborough Utilities Commission, and that is not up for debate.
Okay, so
Period.
The other utilities are safe then?
Absolutely.
All right, perfect. Now, I brought up the Parkway, and I think that's a great segue into that topic. Just because that is a component that, again, has also been in the news lately.
I know.
Although I'm pretty sure over the past 70 years, it's It's been in the news lately has probably been something that a lot of people have heard.
Absolutely.
Because, with a new council, we have had a request for staff to look at alternatives to the Parkway. And again, that is something that there were already a series of transportation studies being done by this council, by city staff now, that was initiated by the last council, to kind of look at different things going on, including improving cycling infrastructure, synchronizing street lights. So there's kind of movement on transportation in Peterborough right now, outside of alternatives to the Parkway. But there is some discussion about the southern portion of the Parkway.
Yeah, absolutely.
That Medical Drive connection between Medical Drive and the existing Parkway. But whether or not there's still a necessity to see that built. And I understand that you have an opinion on that.
Okay, well, definitely. And we really have advanced the whole transportation portfolio forward in the last 2 terms of council, and it'll continue with this one as well, I'm sure. Because we no longer, there will never actually be a parkway. Like, that term is gone. Anything that would be built now would be a complete street. And this is true for any of our construction projects that we do now, because we do consider all modes of transportation, not just the vehicles, but transit, cycling, walking. All of those modes of transportation have to be safe and accommodating to our citizens. So, and that would be also true for, and I'm going to call it the Medical Drive Southern Extension. That is the official term now, please. Medical Drive Southern Extension, because it's not that old P word. And it makes sense. And I've talked to so many people about this, and even during the campaign, the new section of my ward, which is, Gulfview and Silverdale and, Green Hill and Afton and all those areas, Whitefield, like those are all in Autonomy Ward now, and very, very strong support for getting that little connecting piece between Clonsill and Sherbrooke done. It just makes sense. Then we have traffic can get from the 115 to the hospital directly, or the 115 to Park Hill directly. We are so many years away, budget-wise, from doing anything farther north than that, but at least that one piece we can get done. It'd be about $9 million. There are no bridges involved at all, and it could be done. And there is, and as long as I can get at least those 6 votes on council, which I believe I have, if I have council direction, then our new MPP will lobby for us, and he has said he would, with his colleagues at the provincial government, to let us get on with our own transportation issue. And that little connecting piece is one of the things that we need to do.
Yeah, and right now we're tied up in provincial legislation that prevents us from not just proceeding with that southern connection, but with any part of the Parkway.
I know that last piece of legislation really did mess us up, because we couldn't even the intersection beside Prince of Wales School needs attention, but because it's deemed, that's a possible alternative, we can't even fix that. So it really has put us in a bind in dealing with our own transportation issues.
Yeah, and just to clarify for people, the reason why we can't proceed with that southern connection is just because if the city chooses to do that, then we have to do the environmental assessment for the whole length of the Parkway, even if we choose that we're not going to do that.
Exactly.
So then how do we, if we choose to do that southern connection, how do we get past that?
After we build that little piece, you mean?
I mean, before, like, how do we advocate to the provincial government and say, how is this part is necessary? This southern connection between the Parkway and Medical Drive, how can we build that without doing the rest of the work?
Well, that would take the Minister of Climate Change and the Environment of the provincial government now to say, okay, Peterborough, go ahead, do that section. It makes sense. You've got the rest of it, and this is your bottleneck in between. Go ahead and do that piece. And then we can deal with all the other things that may come out of this report, or that we already know about that will re-emerge in this report. But we have to be able to do something with our own transportation issue. And this should be an easy one for MPP Smith to be able to do for us, because we're not asking him for money. We just want permission to look after our own roads.
Yeah, and you see the conversation changing. There are a couple of other councillors who have historically been very pro-Parkway, who, we'd look at Councillor Andrew Beamer and Henry Clark, who say, you know what, maybe we don't end up building the full length of the Parkway. Maybe we do look at alternatives, but at the very least, that southern connection is something that we should build.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see the conversation changing, and I'm hoping that regardless, one way or the other, I'm neutral. I don't really care if the Parkway gets built or not. But regardless, one way or the other, something gets done and the issue is resolved sooner rather than later.
Yes. And this is one step forward, right? We don't necessarily have to have the whole thing all planned. We can do it in pieces, honestly. We really can.
Mm-hmm. So we're nearing the end of the time that we have right now, so I'll leave it off with you, Lesley. Is there anything else that you want to discuss or anything else that we may have forgotten about?
Well, those are pretty much a lot of the hot topics. I think you'll see many opportunities for public engagement. We had quite a few last term of council. I expect there'll be more this time around as well. And all of us are available to you. If you need me, you can call me at home or on my cell or email me, and I will help you in any way I can. And I do thank you to those of you out there who voted for me for my third term. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I will work very hard for you.
Awesome. Lesley, thank you so much for being back here. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
And to everyone else, we'll see you again soon.
See you again soon.